Family, welcome to How Love Works, where we talk about the principles for lasting love. Well, married at first sight. Ah, ha, 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 ha. Well, looks like the plot thickens. Uh, Most of what I anticipated actually occurred, as you guys obviously witnessed. And I'm looking forward to the 5 months after the marriage. There were only two couples that stayed together, and I kind of expected the two that stayed together were the ones that seemed to have gotten a lot of airtime during the season 10, while the other three were wrapped up in a lot of constant debate. There was a lot of trial. There was a lot of pandemonium in the other three relationships. There wasn't a lot going on positively that was very positive in any of the other relationships. So I really wasn't surprised by the outcome. I still stand by my convictions and my statements concerning um, those five couples. I believe that maybe one would stick and the others would fall off. It didn't even matter what their decisions were on decision day. But let's go over a little bit of what occurred on decision day that was kind of, it was expected. I'm sure most of you expected what you saw. For instance, the first couple was Austin and Jessica, and Austin finally declared his love for his wife. And it wasn't surreal or anything. It was just something that was anticipated. The man was doing all the loving things in a relationship, as well as she was, and she really wanted to hear the words, and so she got to hear the words, and so now she was good, and now going forward, no cameras. We get to see whether or not hearing the words are going to be as satisfying as living the words. And I find in my experience that most people do not remain in their relationships is because not from hearing the words, but from not experiencing the words, not living the words. I love you. That's really what causes most of the problems in intimate relationships. Um, but that's another rabbit hole we may visit as I go forward in this summary and discussion. Now, the next couple I believe was I'm not going to get them in order, so I'll just go by my memory. The next couple I believe might have been, I think it was uh, Meka and Michael. And Meka, I think it was fair from the standpoint of this humanistic experimentation on marriage. When you're allowing, complete strangers to come in and use a humanistically based system of science to determine whether or not someone is good for you, and you put it in front of cameras and allow the world as though we're back in the first century AD, and we're in a coliseum watching gladiators fight, and we're engulfed in the joy and the pleasure of watching people slaughter each other. That's sort of the way it is. We're sitting in our family rooms in our lying in our bedrooms and we're watching people go at each other and within the context of the marriage unit. And these people have no earthly idea what they're doing at all. And it's just an experiment on a bunch of monkeys. That's what it looks like. And they kind of act that way. And the takeaways, no one derives any takeaways. There's no benefit other than the pleasure that is derived from watching people rip each other apart emotionally. And so I look at Micah or Meka and Michael, and Meka, she decided that she couldn't remain in the relationship, obviously, because of the fact that she really never got a chance to know who her husband really was. And I agree from that perspective, but I also agree from the perspective that he used his habits, poor as they were, deficient as they were, deplorable as they were, as a reason for the behavior that he demonstrated in the relationship. As far as I was concerned, his wife and the marriage itself was never really truly a priority. I think from the takeaway I got from their relationship is that he and his feelings and how he felt was the priority. And what you always should understand about a concept, at least this concept of marriage, is marriage is a change agent. Marriage is a catalyst for change. You will not be who you were when you enter into marriage. That's the takeaway. If you come into marriage or enter into any lasting relationship, by virtue of the fact that there's circumstances that will change as a result of being in any relationship, but more importantly, the marital relationship, because it is considered permanent, then it's going to have a dynamic that is so powerful that it is going to force you to adapt. And in so doing, that changes who you are, because you are going to have to adapt. Now, those who choose not to adapt, which we will go into more deeply when we get to Mr. Brandon, Mr. Mike, he chose not to adapt in his marriage. He chose not to prioritize his marriage. He chose to think and act like a single man. And he didn't put a lot of effort forward. And as a result of that, he left his wife in a position where she was constantly feeling as though she was being abandoned emotionally. And that is extremely hurtful position to be in emotionally. And since women relate emotionally in almost all relationships, the concentration of pain, I think, is that much more deeper. So that's the takeaway. I knew those two were not going to survive. The only good thing that I saw is that Michael did finally accept his portion. He finally accepted accountability. And I hope that he did take something from the experiment, because that's the way I see it. I just see it as an experiment. This just is for entertainment purposes only. It's not real life. That's what I hope that he got out of it, and I hope Mika did too as well. Going forward, when it comes to selecting a life partner, there's a lot more you have to consider than just your idea of marriage and getting with someone and putting a ring on your finger and going down the road, skipping and thinking marriage is just merely, butterflies, rainbows, and puppy dog tails. It's a lot more than that. It's a lot more deeper, and it's not as shallow as these television shows make it out to be. Okay, now you have Brandon and Taylor. Taylor, obviously, um, she made some errors in judgment herself, and I got to say that's I don't think anyone was without error. Everyone in this experiment, all the women as well as the men, I'm just going to keep it real, all of them had some areas of deficiency. All of them had some problems. But to sit there and ignore some of the brazen, outrageous, and absurd issues that we saw with some of the men, you know, uh, Zach, Brandon, and even Michael come to mind, you would have to really have your head in the sand, because their behavior begot other behavior, which begot other behavior. So it was a foregone conclusion, if you have any common sense, that if you come in here and you have a certain type of behavior that begats another type of behavior that causes detachment, not connection, then don't be surprised at the end, unless you're dealing with someone who's involved in masochism and they derive pleasure from pain, then expect that relationship not to last. Okay. Now, long story short, when it comes to our friend um, Brandon, he strolls in there. The guy strolls in and he sits there and he immediately talks about how he was victimized by the crew, and that the crew was always uh, attacking him in some way, shape, or form. So he was forced to defend himself. And now that's me. I'm ad libbing here, but that's the takeaway I got from his conversation when he was talking to the pastor, and when he claimed that the reason things didn't go well is because he was late twice, and he blamed the crew for that. That the crew had uh, some nefarious ideas on how they were going to do everything they can to stop him, and it caused him to be late twice. That was the reason why he lashed out. And then when the pastor called him out and called him to his face a lie, he just said he was lying. Then he had to go to the bathroom all of a sudden. And then he gets up, and then the pastor calls him out again. He says, "Man, you got this is the behavior that we have been seeing throughout this whole experiment. This is the behavior." And then he says he doesn't have anything to say. He just looks at him with this face like, "Are you done? I got to go to the bathroom." Okay. This is the kind of guy who, in my mind, the question in my mind is this guy on meds? Because he should be. Because from what I see, there is no empathy at all. I don't see any empathy with this guy. I see no humility with this guy. This guy is so full of himself, and he has a reason and excuse for everything. Everything. It doesn't matter. It's like he thinks the world is not connected, and what he does doesn't matter. That he can say and do what he wants, and there is not going to be a consequence. Come on now. So he comes back. She says she doesn't want to be married. She says she wants a divorce. Then what is his first reaction was, because he was so self assured when he got there. And he put on the boy next door face. But now people have looked behind the curtain and they see this guy is not real. This guy is not the real deal. He's fake. Just like, well, I'm not going to say that. He's fake. So they're not buying the boy next door narrative anymore. And so, of course, now he recognizes people don't see him the way he has been displaying himself. He gets upset when she says she wants a divorce. And he immediately, once he goes out the door, he just gets upset, walks away like he does. Walks away when he feels a little emotionally challenged or overwhelmed. And he immediately goes into his pattern of thinking and speaking. He starts blaming. He starts blame shifting. Everything is everyone else's fault. No accountability at all. That is a classic dyed-in-the-wool narcissist in terms of thinking. All right. Then we go to Katie and Derek. And Katie, in my view, is a wild child. She likes bad boys. She thinks of herself as a tough, bad, somewhat neurotic and sexually driven young lady. She everything seems to always come back down. When you listen to her conversation, it always seems to come down to sexuality. She always brings it there. She always takes it there. And it appears to me that when it comes to Katie and my man, Derek had more of a tender heart than I thought. Derek is a young man, so of course he's going to behave like a young man. But he was the kind of guy that a good woman can work with. He didn't appear to be a polyamorous male where he derived his self-esteem from variety, like a lot of young men and women do. Polyamorous people have a whole set of concepts that protect them when people challenge their concept of wholeness through going out and sexualizing a variety of people and giving them some false sense of security. That is unfortunately where his wife is. They decided to stay together. We saw going forward in the next 5 months that she did what I thought she would do, because she has her characters. I'm gonna just keep it real. Her character sucks, and she did what I thought she would do. Because when she and Derek had their conversation about the promise they were going to make as a couple, she decided to make happiness the altar to put the security of their relationship on, instead of commitment being the altar, which requires responsibility on both parts. Happiness, you give up your responsibility because you're giving the other person, you're telling the other person to be responsible for your happiness, and you are responsible for their happiness. But what I see is it meant really to her is that he's responsible for her happiness. she's not responsible for his. Because if it were true, she wouldn't have slept with whoever she slept with. Might have been the ex-boyfriend. Because she likes to virtue signal a lot, and she likes to give the impression that she's morally superior, and she's a know-it-all type of female. And unless you've been around like an old head like me, you don't read, you're a young boy, you letting your feelings dictate everything. You're not paying attention to the way she communicates. And so he ended up getting the predictable outcome. I hope he dumped her. I hope. And I think last but not least, Zach and Mindy, they had already separated. So Mindy, she stuck to her guns. She didn't even really look at him much. And I think that was something that he wasn't accustomed to. He really had a difficult time with people rejecting his moral position. He had a hard time with it. I think he felt a sense of shame, a sense of guilt, and he needed to. Anybody want to say anything to me about that in the comments? That's fine. We're not going to agree, because I don't think you should treat people the way he treated her. He signed up for this. Same thing with Michael. Same thing with Brandon. They all signed up for this experiment, and he should have gave it all, but he didn't. He left his responsibility and the commitment that is required in this relationship. He left it at the door, because marriage is sort of like the statement, as you've heard me, guys, you've heard me say this in the past. Marriage is almost like the statement that was said of Spider-Man. Love and marriage is, I could say love and marriage is like a nutrient, like a mineral, okay? And you can be deficient in it if you don't get enough of it, okay? And you don't learn how to actually operate in it. And the statement that was made to Peter Parker by his uncle before he died was, with great power comes great responsibility. The power of love and the power of marriage, which is a change agent, requires great responsibility because of the power thereof, right? And so he didn't operate in that as a man. Michael didn't operate in that as a man. And Brandon sure didn't operate in that power and the responsibility that comes with that power. And so as far as I'm concerned, I didn't expect a whole lot from either of those men, because there's another scripture in the Bible that says, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so marriage is the ultimate relationship as far as I'm concerned. It's the ultimate relationship. And there's a lot to be expected from both parties. But you have to be able to go into it the right way. And those are basically my takeaways. You can't go into marriage or any other relationship thinking that like a child. Look at where we're at right now. Did anyone expect us to be in a pandemic? You guys have heard me say this a number of times. I've been married for a long time, and I'm going through a lot of issues. I'm going through a lot of circumstances in the economy, several downturns in the economy with my wife. Now we're going through a pandemic with my wife. I don't see the glass half empty. I see it half full. I see the obstacles as the way. I have a positive perspective when it comes to issues of the day. no matter how grave they may be. And so I'm not naive. I accept them. I see them. I recognize them. But I see them as opportunities to grow as a person. I see them as a way to become more intimate with my wife and make our relationship that much better. So that's my time. I thank you for yours. Catch you on the other side. God bless.